Hello, BookTube. When you look back on the year 2020, several of you will remember the traumatic low points of that time. The once-in-a-century pandemic, the massive cratering of the economy that started and will only exfold from there, and most of all, the book wars of the OGBG, the Old Geezers Book Group, a core of extremely inessential booktubers who started to one-up each other with trips to the used bookstores. The main provocateur was Jason Harrigan of Byways and Bookworm, and I think all sides thought that there would be peace at last, peace in our time, once Jason sort of retired from BookTube or went into rest mode or whatever he's doing at the moment. Certainly I thought that. I thought, well, things will be nice and peaceful now rather than the gauntlet being thrown every single week. And then what happened? A shot rang out right here in New England, and I got a musket ball right between the shoulder blades from Vermont. From Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads, who went on a book haul, and then another book haul, and then another book haul. This will not stand. So, I went to the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. Those of you who are new to the channel, the Brattle Bookshop is my go-to place for books. It's a used bookstore. The 3 stories. The top floor is the offices and also antique and collectible books if you want to go in and pay a reasonable price to get a bookish snob friend of yours, a first edition of something early. That's where you would go. You would go up there to do that. As you might be able to tell from this channel, that means I'm almost never up on the 3rd floor. The 1st and 2nd floor are just what you could call an ordinary used bookstore, although they're jam-packed with great stuff. And the stock changes all the time. As soon as you walk in the front door, you are presented with the enormous buying table where a very brisk business in new acquisitions is constantly being done. Once upon a time, for far too short a time, many years, but far too short a time, the first sight that you would have encountered when you walked in the front door was a gigantic Bernese mountain dog sprawled on the floor like a bear rug. Unfortunately, that's no longer true, but the buying table isn't going anywhere. And in addition to all of that, there's a sale lot right next door to the building that is full of $1, $3, and $5 sale books. Thousands of them. Not sorted in any way except by price. So, and those also overturn all the time, constantly. I don't like the end product of the overturning, because when those books have had their day in the sun, they are constantly rotating backwards and backwards in the lot. And at the back of the lot, lurking there, like Pennywise, it is a dumpster. The final fate of all of these books, that the ones that don't attract a browser, is to be thrown away. I spent a lot of time out in the sale lot. I have done so in all years, in all weathers. It's a bright, sunny, brisk day today. I am told by the weather gurus that I follow that spate of seasonably warmer weather is on the way. It's chilly today. It's going to be chilly and overcast tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. But the long-term forecast looks like a warming up, a mild winter. It's to take advantage of a mild winter that I am indulging in what you can no doubt overhear in this video, which is roofers. Roofers are at work here at Hyde Cottage, doing whatever it is they do and working whatever magic they have so as not to fall off the top of the building. Well, I'm trusting that you can hear me over the background noise anyway. I also fixed the shaky cam, the classic Steve Donoghue shaky cam that was plaguing many videos in a row since I had this upheaval here at Hyde Cottage. I finally figured out the absolute basic. The thing necessary to avoid the shaky cam is for the camera not to be on the bed. I am sitting on my bed right now, and if the camera is on the bed, no matter what it's on, it can be positioned on as many books as you want. It's still going to bounce up and down. It can't be on the bed, and I think I've figured out a way to avoid that. But anyway, I went to the Brattle first thing this morning, specifically to answer the bootless, unscabbarded aggression of my northern neighbor. And I got a bunch of books, and I want to show them to you. And we'll start off with a book that I didn't get at the Brattle. I did my 8.1K Q&A answer palooza yesterday. And at several points during those videos, my little schnauzer Frida was making an appearance, was intruding on the videos, causing me to pan the camera around the room, which I think I can probably still do even with this new arrangement. I don't really want to. I would pan the camera around the room like that. It's a new room setup. And several of you emailed me. I leave my email in every video, so you can email me about anything, even something as annoying as this. Several of you emailed me and pointed out that on the floor over there was a mail package. And that's true. I got a package late in the day on Saturday, and I just reflexively don't open my mail now. I save it for the cameras, but then I finished with those videos and thought, you surely don't want to hear from me anymore. So I stopped and opened that package. And I'm kind of sorry that I'll show you the book. I'll tell you a little bit about it. I'm kind of sorry that I did open it off camera because it's hilarious. It's one of those serendipity things, one of those just weird timing coincidences that are funny. It would have been even funnier if I'd opened it right on camera in front of you, because this is a book about minimalism. When I was pulling everything out of my book room and tearing everything apart here, there was an interval where I had a book room space completely empty, echoing and empty. And I couldn't let that go. I couldn't let that opportunity go to roast the totally fraudulent YouTube minimalism channels that are all over my feed. So I did a few minimalism videos that have attracted a large amount of traffic from outside of BookTube, with people just obviously keywording minimalism. And then I got this book, Hello Habits, by Fumio Sasaki, A Minimalist Guide to a Better Life. I think this is a follow-up to a book of his. I think the first book that he did was Goodbye Things. Yes, Goodbye Things was the first book that he did. And this is his follow-up. So I got a minimalism book after poking fun at minimalism. Fumio Sasaki changed his life when he became a minimalist. Now, key thing you want to understand here, I haven't read this book yet, but the key thing you want to understand here is that the same thing is true of minimalism authors that is true of minimalism YouTubers, which is that every sentence out of their word is a lie. And by extension, every sentence that they approve in a pub sheet is also a lie. Fumio Sasaki changed his life when he became a minimalist is a lie. But anyway, before minimalism could really stick, he had to make it a habit. All of us live our lives based on the habits we formed, from when we get up in the mornings to what we eat and drink and how likely we are to actually make it to the gym. In this book, the author explains how we can acquire the new habits that we want and get rid of the ones that don't do us any good. And that's what this is going to be. This is going to be just the author going through his habits and see how I spend my days. The very first chapter is called How I Spend My Days. My schedule on a typical day: 5 a.m., get up, do some yoga. 5:30, meditate. 6, work on my writing or my blog. 7, clean house, take a shower, do the laundry, have breakfast, prepare my lunch. 8, write in my diary, practice English, read the news or social media. 9, take a power nap, a strategic way to get back to bed. 9:30, commute to the library. 11:30, eat lunch. And so on. And there are lies baked right into every interval of that. Every single interval of that. This author has not actually done that list of things, that list of daily habits, ever. Not even once to try it out. Notice, tobacco addiction is nowhere on that list. It's the first thing this author thinks about, the second thing, the third thing, the fourth thing. Then there are little intervals. Maybe you can tough it through a shower, but then it's the fifth thing. And so on and so forth. So on and so forth. I'm just scrolling on the phone. It's not on that list. So this is January release, I believe. Early January. So this is something for the new year. I won't be reading any more of it than that one excerpt. But that was the thing that was on the floor for you eagle-eyed viewers who were noticing a package on the floor. That's what it was. Now we'll go to the Brattle, to the books I got at the Brattle, and we'll start off with a couple of paperback murder mysteries. This has been a theme all through 2020. Where I started the year with just an enormous yen to read murder mysteries, especially to find all sorts of out-of-the-way things, not the latest Elizabeth George, but to find out-of-the-way things. And that was helped by the fact that the Brattle had, either in early 2020 or in late 2019, the Brattle had an enormous buy of paperback murder mysteries. Just enormous, thousands of them. And I saw them, and I thought, okay, you're going to control yourself here. You're not just going to buy all of these. You're going to control yourself. I console myself that in 2020 I have largely been controlled when it comes to how much damage I've done to that collection. I've let other people have a shot at it. But at the beginning of 2020, I was reading murder mysteries like crazy and loving it. And then the real toll of the pandemic started to weigh in March, April, and May, that sort of thing. All of a sudden, I didn't feel like reading about murders anymore. I shifted to science fiction for a large part of the year. But it turns out I came back to murder mysteries. And so now when I go to the Brattle, I sort of make a little ritual out of going to that massive trove of murder mysteries and picking a couple. And the thing about that trove, it's 5 or 6 shelves, double stacked with mass market paperbacks. The thing about it is, I'm not going to know these authors. For every one murder mystery author that I know, there's going to be somebody who wrote 6 or 7 or even 10 books in a series that I've never heard of before. And these are both that, I believe. They're certainly authors that I don't know. The first is Timothy Hale. This is The Devil and the Dolce Vita. Let me read you the back of this thing here. The hot Neapolitan blood of Commissario Achille Peroni runs chill in anticipation of the clammy, fog-bound Venetian winter. Oh, I know that clammy, fog-bound Venetian winter very well. It's what attracted me to this book. Seconded to the Venice Questura, the Valentino of the Italian police feels he is no more than a museum attendant. But Kezia Michaelis changes all that. A beautiful and mysterious chanteuse with the dark, dangerous eyes of an Israeli woman soldier. Her image haunts Peroni. All he has to do is find her. The disappearance of the lovely cafe singer plunges Peroni into a web of decadence, devil worship, and abduction. A dilettante super-rich clique hooked on black magic attempts to buy him off, body and soul. Can high ideals and the love of a good woman save Peroni from an evil as old as time and the devil's path to the Dolce Vita? Just the fish out of water aspect of someone going to Venice in winter. I have been in Venice in winter, and it was long enough ago so that the city still retained vestiges of its wintertime attitude, which has caused travelers and visitors to Venice for centuries to resort to a whole vocabulary book of expletives. Because Venice, despite being where it's located, and despite having fairly damp, clammy, and inclement weathers in the winter, is built exclusively for summer. The older parts, the older buildings are the ones that haven't been stripped out into B&Bs and made all modernized. And when I was there was no such thing as B&B. There was no such thing as any of that. And so you could get an apartment that was absolutely beautiful, just perfect, for 3 seasons out of the year. But in winter, it was impossible to heat. Sometimes there was no heating unit. And visitors from England on embassy or on visit to Venice during Tudor times and Stuart times routinely made the same complaints, the exact same, sometimes about the exact same buildings. They would say, there isn't even coal braziers here. It's like they don't know that winter comes every year. So that's what attracted me to this. We'll see if I stick around for Peroni and his hot Neapolitan blood. This next one is a British country village murder mystery of a type that I have really liked. I would say in 2020's murder mystery reading, that is probably my favorite thing. The crime in a little village where the organist gets it in the neck. This is called Murder Plu Perfect by Kenneth Giles. Let me see here. There's a reason behind let's see here. There's a reason behind Sir Charles Fennell's offer to give Inspector James, his family, and Sergeant Honeybody a paid vacation in the countryside. The village lord is anxious to prove his long-dead great-aunt innocent of poisoning her fiancé. But the puzzle of an ancient murder turns into the search for the killer of Snape, who is very much at large. And the work of James and Honeybody is complicated by folk dance enthusiasts, rich Americans, village eccentrics, and James' 3 young offspring. Because he brings his high-strung wife, their enormous dog, and their 3 children with him. And this rich person commissions him to solve a century-old crime. And I read the first couple of pages of this and kind of liked it. I kind of liked what I was seeing. I've noticed that this is a Walker paperback. I believe that is a UK imprint that I believe a lot of Walker paperbacks from the UK became Penguin paperbacks of Penguin murder mysteries here in the U.S. And I've noticed that when I'm prowling that gigantic bookcase of paperback murder mysteries of Brattle, I've noticed that some of the ones that I have picked, I'm picking these things at random or on, the plot summary in the back of the book. Because a lot of times, most of the time, I don't know anything about the authors. I've never heard of them before. And I've noticed that a lot of the ones that I end up liking, a lot of the ones that end up being quite good, are those green-spined Penguin murder mysteries paperbacks. And this seems to me to be of the same species as that. One way or another, these things are easy to gobble down and so much fun. So I will be doing that in good course. And then we have the normal size books. We'll start with something. It's an oldie but a goodie. I've had this many times before, and I always manage to misplace it or give it away or get rid of it. So I always get it again. These were all free. These were all done with store credit. So I wasn't agonizing over anything here. And this is, of course, the Canterbury Tales, and it's the Neville Coghill Canterbury Tales, the Penguin Classic translation. A modernization, adaptation by Neville Coghill that has sold Penguin a gazillion copies over the last 70 years. And was, at least for 2 whole generations, the Chaucer that most readers knew. When they thought of the Canterbury Tales, they were actually thinking of Neville Coghill, who is very smart and very dry and very clever, although not as smart and not as dry and not as clever as Chaucer, who doesn't require that much work to read in the original. But anyway, I have a fondness. Even though I love Chaucer in the original, I have a fondness for the Neville Coghill version. I like it very much. And this is a big trade-sized illustrated edition that Penguin put out. See, there you have the penguin on the spine there. This has also the Barnes & Noble sticker. No refund without sticker. Some of you may be old enough to remember that old Barnes & Noble, where the motto was, if you paid full price for it, you didn't get it at Barnes & Noble. And you couldn't... They did a lot of rearguard action in terms of returning books. I don't understand that at all, but nevertheless, as far as I'm concerned, return policies in retail, they don't make any sense to me at all. If you buy something and it's defective, if you 40 years ago you bought a copy of this book at Barnes & Noble for, what was it at Barnes & Noble? $2. If you'd bought a copy of this at Barnes & Noble 40 years ago and there were pages missing, something like that, or maybe page 10 reprints 10 times or something like that. Okay, you bring that back and you return it for another copy of the book that doesn't have that defect, but you don't buy a book and return it for any other reason, anything other than a physical defect. And good Lord, people did. They tried to, anyway. I remember once I was working at a Barnes & Noble in downtown Boston, and I was never allowed anywhere near the registers at that old store. This was before the registers were fully automated, so I could have cost the company a great deal of money with my ineptitude. So I maintained the information desk. And a lot of customers would go to the information desk thinking that's where they did their book returns. And one customer brought up a book and just put it on the counter in front of me and said, I want to return this. And my standard spiel was to say, okay, well, you don't want to stop here. You want to bring it up front to the registers, and that's where they'll handle it. But instead, it was an idle moment, and I said, okay, well, it looks like it's in perfect condition. Why are you returning it? And the customer looked at me without batting an eyelash, said I didn't like it. I so much wanted to say, try that at the next restaurant you eat at. But instead, I just said, all right, well, you want to talk to the people at the registers. But anyway, the reason I love this Penguin trade, I have the Neville Coghill Canterbury Tales. And I also have Canterbury Tales in the original, which is the way to go, because that's where you get Chaucer's, the full gleam in his eye. But the reason I get this is because it's not just this thing. It's not just the period illustrations, the tapestries and the whatnot. It's also photographs. Black and white photographs of weapons and armor and whatnot, but also photographs of places. Let me see if I can find you an example here. I remember I have many times had this volume, and I have many times daydreamed over those photographs. Of course, now I'm not going to be able to find one. It's just lavishly illustrated, throughout. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not finding one. That's all right. You know what if? Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. There we go. That's a photograph down the bottom there. You've got a tapestry up on the top, but there you have, that's Jason Harrigan's home. So I got this anyway, and I will probably take advantage of the opportunity to reread a couple of the tales I never don't need much in the way of nudging to revisit Chaucer. Then this next one is something that I never actually read. It came out when I was reviewing books, and this is the UK edition. I don't think I ever actually read the thing, and I'm a little bit dubious, a little bit doubtful about it. This is by Judith Cook, and it is Roaring Boys. Elizabethan playwrights and players in Elizabethan London, that sort of thing. And if I remember correctly, the title was changed for America to something like Shakespeare's Rat Pack or something dumb like that. And it's not a big book it's a huge subject, and it's not a big book. And I seem to remember that the critical consensus at the time in the UK was that it is a slight work. But that's okay. It didn't cost me any money, and it's not going to cost me much in the way of time. Who knows? I may end up liking it. So we shall see. Okay, that helicopter is not part of the roofers, I promise. I'm willing to pay, but I'm not willing to pay for helicopters. It was just noisy. That's all. It's just noisy. It'll be probably noisy all week. But at least we're not bumping up and down, right? This camera angle, this camera works. My solution works. I deserve a pat on the back for that, no? Anyway, this next one is something I've had many, many, many times. I love it, of course, but then I saw it today. I realized, oh, you don't have a copy of that right now. And I'm always willing to do it. This is Sailor Historian. This is Samuel Eliot Morrison. That is himself, the great American historian and biographer, Samuel Eliot Morrison, whose statue I will show you if you ever come here to Boston in safer days. He has a statue on the mall that is wonderful. His daughter put together an anthology of selections from his work. He helped, and he agreed to all of the selections that are in here. And one of the reasons that I love this is that it has little bits and pieces that aren't collected elsewhere. I have By Land and by Sea, a collection of bits and pieces of addresses and commentary and essays that Samuel Eliot Morrison wrote. But this has a lot of those. It also has selections from the histories, selections from the biographies, little lyric passages and whatnot. Because this is an author you can do that with. Good luck doing it with a lot of historians at work today. But Samuel Eliot Morrison remembered that writing beautifully is also part of the historian's craft. That history is not just records, but also story. It's narrative. And it can be done well or done boringly. And he never did it boringly. Never. In fact, I believe this volume opens with a quote along those lines. Yes, Arthur Schlesinger is quoted here. Emily Morrison Beck quotes Arthur Schlesinger saying, "Your father was the most important man in my life. It was from him that I first understood the importance of style in history. He knew that the essence of history is the recent reconstruction of the past, and he used his enormous literary gifts to fuse narrative and analysis into a single texture. But I mean style in a larger sense, too, his whole attitude towards life and society. One feels that his death breaks a last link to the classic past. He was, in the apostolic succession, the last heir of the great New England tradition, Bancroft, Parkman, Prescott, Motley, Henry Adams, and there is no one to come after." Now, I myself would argue with that in terms of style. It's not Samuel Eliot Morrison's own style, but it is definitely there and definitely present. It's very Baroque, but it's also very beautiful in its own way. It would be Douglas Shantucci, the author of Lost Boston and a bunch of other books, and very consciously a stylist as well as an archive-ready historian. And I'm sure that the tradition will move on. I certainly would think that all that the description that Schlesinger just gave there applies to Stacy Schiff. That's for sure. But one way or another, I will happily, like with the Chaucer, I will happily revisit little bits and pieces of this thing. Then we have an enormous brick of the thing. In fact, our last two books are enormous bricks. When I don't have muscular teenagers to be beasts of burden, when I'm lugging these things around myself, I always manage to find the 1,000-page books. The first one is something we've seen on this channel before, but only as a trade paperback. I have patiently waited, knowing that I would find it as a hardcover. I want it as a hardcover because my trade paperback, even though it's reinforced, is falling apart. And the reason it is because I go back to this book in part or in whole so often because it is so brilliant. And that is this. Christianity, the First 3,000 Years by Darren Mccullough. A great, big, huge thing, but at least now I have it as a hardcover. So I will find my poor, battered trade paperbacks probably in this room. Yeah, there it is, right over there. I will take that trade paperback and give it a polite Christian burial in the background. This is Darren Mccullough's History of Christianity, and there is something to talk about. The blending of acumen and style. Good Lord. You won't find it done any better than in this book. Samuel L. Morrison or not, he would have looked on this book with enormous amounts of approval and probably seized a little in jealousy as well. I'm sure that when you have seen other booktubers or maybe bookish people in your life refer to this book, I am sure that in all cases they have started immediately to sing its praises. Well, that is justified. That is absolutely justified. I've sung its praises myself before on this channel many times. This is a brilliant work. And it isn't big and stodgy. It has a lightning, brilliant observation on almost every page. And then the last book we have, it's another doorstop, and it's a little on the intimidating side in terms of size. I've read it already. I read it when it first came out. I think I reviewed it. But it's not so much the book as it is the previous owner, because this is the return, perhaps for the last time, of the tabby cat. Whoever this person is, putting these 8 million tabs all over these books. But the book itself is by Gordon Wood, who a lot of you will know from his many, many reviews in the New York Review of Books. That's this thing. Empire of Liberty. What's the subtitle? A History of the Early Republic, 1789 to 1815. This is part of the Oxford History of the United States, and this is Gordon Wood writing on basically the War of 1812. I mean, it's all the things leading up to that, but the premise of the book, the underlying ethos of the book, is that the American Revolution didn't really end the conflict between America and Britain. That it only ended with the Second War on this continent, the Second War on the territory of the United States. And that war is told wonderfully throughout here. America grappling with the seismic effects of revolution in France, told wonderfully in here. Gordon Wood is not a very conspicuous stylist, but he's still very, very interesting. This is a great, big, huge thing, but I will go through the tabs to make sure that the tabby cat never tabbed anything important. It seems to be the pattern, and then I'll remove them because I don't want things like that hanging off my own book. But then there'll probably be chunks of this that I'll reread as well. So there you have it. That was my trip to the Brattle, plus one book in the mail. And it's a trip to the Brattle that should fill you with foreboding. Is it a stalemate on the song? Or is this the return of full-blown aggression in the OGBG book wars? Are we going to end 2020 much as we began it? With savage old codgers holding up books on camera in front of each other. Will the renewed hostilities even bring Jason Harrigan back into the fray? I don't know. The most I can tell you is to stay tuned. It could be that the lamps are going out all over BookTube. But in the meantime, it was a fun trip. This is going to result in a lot of impromptu reading. So we have Empire of Liberty by Gordon Wood, his biggest book, and very enjoyable. We have Christianity, the First 3,000 Years by Darren Mccullough, an amazing, amazing work. I know I'm being repetitive, but I cannot praise it highly enough. Then we have Sailor Historian, bits and pieces, the excerpts from Samuel L. Morrison, who's really best appreciated, he's really best experienced in book form. But if you don't have any books by him and you're wondering, maybe your library has just this, a worthwhile place to start. Then Roaring Boys by Judith Cook. We'll see how deep into the subject it goes of the theater life of Shakespeare's day. We have an enormous amount of documentation from that time, so we'll see how much of it she covers. Then the Neville Coghill Canterbury Tales in a Penguin Illustrated extra big paperback. So that's a lot of fun. Then we have, let's see here, Murder Plu Perfect, in which a crime of the distant past definitely redounds to the present with more crimes, and The Devil and the Dolce Vita, where a displaced Neapolitan cop goes to Venice in winter, and that's working as one last good nerve. And on top of that, we have Hello Habits, which is Fumio Sasaki's follow-up to Goodbye Things, and which is all about minimalism. So I'm not going to read it. I'm going to read in a lot of these books, probably the thing, if I'm being honest, I mean, the murder mysteries are very tempting, but probably the thing in this pile that will get my attention first and most for the longest amount of time will be Christianity, would be Darren Mccullough's book. Because once you start reading bits and pieces of it, you just want to keep going. But anyway, that is your Brattle book haul for today. I wish you all well, and remember, loose lips sink ships. Thank you, too.